I still can't believe it. Marcus Chen. The quiet guy from the Golden Nugget? There's no way he could have done this.
Sarah, I've been working homicide for 15 years. Trust me, the quiet ones are always the most dangerous. But I get it. When you work alongside someone for months, you think you know them.
But he was so normal, professional. He never raised his voice, never got into arguments with customers or other dealers. He'd help cover shifts when people called in sick. How does someone like that just kill someone?
You compartmentalize. You build walls in your mind. You convince yourself it was justified, or necessary, or that you didn't have a choice. But eventually those walls crumble. And that's when we catch them.
I worked the same shifts as Rebecca sometimes. She was this bright, bubbly girl from Ohio, always talking about auditions, always optimistic. And you're telling me Marcus just strangled her with her own necklace? Over what?
Over his secret. See, Marcus wasn't who he claimed to be. His whole life in Vegas was built on lies, and Rebecca threatened to expose that. Some people will do anything to protect their secrets, Sarah. Anything.
20 years. He walked around that casino floor for 20 years, dealing cards, making small talk, probably even talking about Rebecca's case when it was in the news. How do you live with yourself after doing something like that?
You compartmentalize. You build walls in your mind. You convince yourself it was justified, or necessary, or that you didn't have a choice. But eventually those walls crumble. And that's when we catch them.
I can't wrap my head around it. Marcus Chen, a murderer. It's like finding out your neighbor is a serial killer.
Well, Sarah, that's exactly what happened. Sometimes the monster doesn't look like a monster. Sometimes he just looks like the guy dealing cards at table 12.
How it all began. The neon lights of Las Vegas never sleep, casting their eternal glow over a city built on secrets, fortune, and the occasional misfortune. But some secrets run deeper than the foundations of the casinos themselves. This is the story of Marcus Chen, a blackjack dealer whose carefully constructed life came crashing down after 20 years of deception, lies, and murder. It was March 15, 2024, when Detective Sarah Martinez received a phone call that would finally close one of Las Vegas Metro Police's oldest cold cases. The caller was nervous, stuttering, claiming to have information about the murder of Rebecca Williams, a case that had gone cold 2 decades ago. The caller was Elena Vasquez, a night shift janitor at the Mirage Casino. What she had to say would unravel a web of deceit that stretched back to 2004, when Las Vegas was experiencing one of its greatest boom periods, and when Marcus Chen first arrived in the city with nothing but a fake social security card and a desperate need to disappear. Rebecca Williams was 28 years old when she died. An aspiring actress from Ohio, she had come to Las Vegas like so many others, chasing dreams that seemed just within reach under the desert lights. She worked as a cocktail waitress at the Golden Nugget, pulling double shifts to pay for acting classes and headshots, always believing her big break was just around the corner. Those who knew Rebecca described her as vivacious, kind-hearted, and perhaps a little too trusting. She had a laugh that could be heard across the casino floor and a smile that earned her the best tips in the house. But Rebecca had one fatal flaw. She fell hard and fast for the wrong kind of man. On the night of October 13, 2004, Rebecca Williams left her apartment on East Desert Inn Road to meet someone. She never made it home. Her body was discovered 3 days later in a shallow grave in the desert, about 40 miles northeast of the city. She had been strangled with her own necklace, a delicate gold chain with a small cross that her grandmother had given her for her 18th birthday. The investigation that followed was thorough but ultimately fruitless. Rebecca's friends and co-workers were interviewed. Her apartment was searched. Her phone records were analyzed. But the trail went cold. There were no witnesses, no DNA evidence that led anywhere meaningful, and no clear motive. Rebecca Williams became just another unsolved case in a city where people disappear regularly, swallowed up by the desert and the darkness. But Detective John Russo, who handled the original investigation, never forgot about Rebecca. Even after his retirement in 2018, he would occasionally pull out the file, studying the crime scene photos and witness statements, hoping something new would jump out at him. He had a theory. Rebecca knew her killer. The crime was personal, intimate even, but he could never prove it. Marcus Chen arrived in Las Vegas in late 2003, but that wasn't his real name. Born Li Wei in Guangzhou, China, he had emigrated to the United States in 2001 on a student visa to attend UCLA. But Marcus never made it to graduation. Instead, he dropped out in his junior year and worked a series of odd jobs, eventually finding himself in trouble with some very dangerous people. The details of Marcus's troubles in Los Angeles remain murky, but what we do know is this. He owed money to the wrong people, and by 2003, he needed to disappear. Las Vegas, with its transient population and cash-based economy, was the perfect place for someone looking to start over with a new identity. Marcus was intelligent, charming, and most importantly, lucky at cards. He had learned to count cards in underground games in Los Angeles, and while casinos eventually caught on to his methods, he was skilled enough to make a living. More importantly, he was personable enough to eventually talk his way into legitimate employment. By 2004, Marcus had secured a job as a blackjack dealer at the Golden Nugget. He worked the graveyard shift, dealing cards to tourists, locals, and the occasional high roller. He kept to himself mostly, but he was professional and reliable. His supervisors liked him, his colleagues respected his skill, and the customers appreciated his quiet competence. But Marcus had a secret that went beyond his false identity. He had a temper, a darkness that he kept carefully controlled most of the time. Those who got close enough to see it described Marcus as having dead eyes when he was angry, as if something essential had switched off inside him. Rebecca Williams and Marcus Chen worked in the same casino, but their paths rarely crossed during business hours. Rebecca worked the day shift, serving drinks to gamblers and tourists. Marcus worked nights, dealing cards to insomniacs and degenerates. By all accounts, they barely knew each other, but that wasn't entirely true. According to Elena Vasquez, the janitor whose call would eventually break the case, Rebecca and Marcus had been seeing each other secretly for several months before her death. Elena worked the graveyard shift, cleaning the casino after the day. Crowds had gone home and before the serious night gambling began. It was during this quiet period, usually between 4 and 6 a.m., that she would see Rebecca and Marcus together. They thought they were being discreet, Elena told Detective Martinez during their first interview. But I see everything. I'm invisible to most people, just the cleaning lady, you know. But I watch, I notice things. Elena described seeing Rebecca visit Marcus during his breaks usually, meeting him in a storage room on the 3rd floor that was rarely used. She saw them arguing sometimes, usually with Rebecca looking upset and Marcus appearing cold, dismissive. The last time Elena saw them together was 3 days before Rebecca's body was discovered. She was crying, Elena remembered. Really crying, not just upset. And he just stood there, like stone, no emotion at all. I should have said something then, but who was going to listen to me? Armed with Elena's testimony, Detective Martinez reopened the Rebecca Williams case with renewed energy. The first step was to locate Marcus Chen, which proved more difficult than expected. Employment records showed that Marcus had left his job at the Golden Nugget in November 2004, less than a month after Rebecca's body was found. His forwarding address led to an apartment that had been vacant for years. But Marcus hadn't left Las Vegas entirely. Detective Martinez discovered that he had simply moved deeper into the shadows of the city, working at smaller, less reputable establishments where background checks were minimal and questions weren't asked. Over the years, he had worked at various off-strip casinos, always keeping a low profile, always moving on before anyone got too curious about his past. The breakthrough came when Martinez discovered that Marcus had been arrested for assault in 2019. The charges were eventually dropped, but his fingerprints and DNA had been collected and entered into the system. When Martinez ran the DNA against evidence from the Rebecca Williams case, she got a match. It wasn't from the obvious sources. Marcus had been too careful for that. But microscopic skin cells found under Rebecca's fingernails, evidence that had been preserved but never successfully matched, came back as a positive hit for Marcus Chen. Detective Martinez found Marcus Chen working as a poker dealer at a small casino on the outskirts of North Las Vegas. He was 54 years old, graying at the temples, wearing wire-rimmed glasses that made him look more like an accountant than a killer. When she approached him at the end of his shift, Marcus didn't run. He didn't protest his innocence. He simply looked tired, as if he had been waiting for this moment for 20 years. "I figured someone would come eventually," he said quietly as Martinez placed him in handcuffs. "I'm actually surprised it took this long." During the interrogation that followed, Marcus's carefully constructed facade finally cracked. The story that emerged was both heartbreaking and horrifying. Marcus confirmed that he'd been having a relationship with Rebecca Williams. But it wasn't the romantic relationship that Rebecca had believed it to be. For Marcus, Rebecca was simply convenient, someone who asked few questions and expected little in return. But Rebecca had fallen in love, and that had created a problem. She started talking about the future, Marcus told Detective Martinez. She wanted to introduce me to her friends, her family back in Ohio. She wanted to make it official, you know? But I couldn't do that. I couldn't let anyone look too closely at my life. The situation came to a head in October 2004 when Rebecca discovered Marcus's real identity. She had found documents in his apartment, his real passport, letters written in Chinese, evidence that everything he had told her about himself was a lie. She was going to expose me, Marcus said. Not because she was vindictive, but because she thought she could help me. She wanted me to come clean, get proper documentation, start over the right way. She didn't understand that I couldn't start over. Some things you can't come back from. On the night of October 13, 2004, Marcus lured Rebecca to a meeting under the pretense of explaining everything to her. Instead of meeting at her apartment as she had expected, Marcus convinced her to drive out to a remote location in the desert where they could talk privately. The murder itself was not premeditated in the traditional sense. Marcus had brought Rebecca to the desert with the intention of convincing her to keep his secret. But when Rebecca refused, when she insisted that lying wasn't the answer and that she would help him find a legal solution to his problems, Marcus realized that she would never understand the gravity of his situation. I didn't plan to kill her, Marcus said during his confession. But she just wouldn't listen. She kept saying things would work out, that love could overcome anything. She lived in a fantasy world where everything had a happy ending. But I knew better. The actual murder was quick and brutal. Marcus strangled Rebecca with her own necklace, the gold chain that had been a gift from her grandmother. He buried her body in a shallow grave and drove her car back to the city, abandoning it in a casino parking lot where it would blend in with hundreds of other vehicles. Marcus had made one crucial mistake, however. In his struggle with Rebecca, she had fought back more fiercely than he had expected. Her fingernails had scraped across his face and neck, collecting skin cells that would eventually damn him 20 years later. In the days and weeks following Rebecca's murder, Marcus executed a carefully planned strategy to distance himself from the crime. He continued working at the Golden Nugget for another month, maintaining his normal routine and showing no signs of distress or guilt. When questioned by police during their initial investigation, Marcus expressed appropriate shock and sadness about Rebecca's death, but claimed to barely know her beyond casual workplace interactions. Marcus had learned from his earlier troubles in Los Angeles that the key to avoiding detection was to appear utterly ordinary and unremarkable. He cooperated with the police investigation, even volunteering to provide fingerprints and DNA samples if needed. A calculated risk, since DNA technology in 2004 was less sophisticated than it would later become. What Marcus hadn't anticipated was that Las Vegas Metro Police would preserve evidence so meticulously, or that DNA analysis technology would advance so dramatically over the next 2 decades. The skin cells under Rebecca's fingernails, invisible to the naked eye and impossible to analyze with 2004 technology, had been carefully stored and cataloged, waiting for science to catch up with justice. After leaving the Golden Nugget, Marcus crafted a new identity within his false identity. He cultivated a reputation as a loner, someone who had been emotionally scarred by a previous relationship and preferred to keep to himself. This persona served him well over the years, explaining his reluctance to get close to people while simultaneously making him appear harmless and even sympathetic. For 20 years, Marcus Chen lived with his secret, carefully constructing a life that appeared normal on the surface but was built entirely on lies and murder. He moved frequently within Las Vegas, never staying at one casino or one apartment for too long. He avoided forming close relationships, maintaining only superficial friendships with coworkers and neighbors. But the burden of his secret took its toll. Coworkers over the years described Marcus as increasingly paranoid and isolated. He startled easily, especially when approached from behind. He avoided crowds and social gatherings. He never dated, claiming to be not ready or still healing from past hurt. The closest anyone came to discovering Marcus's true nature was in 2019, when he was arrested for assaulting a parking lot attendant who had asked too many questions about his identification. The charges were eventually dropped when security footage proved inconclusive. But the incident revealed cracks in Marcus's carefully maintained facade. He just snapped, The parking attendant, David Torres, later told reporters, "I was just doing my job, asking for ID like I always do, and this guy went completely crazy. Started screaming about privacy and rights and how people needed to mind their own business. It was like he was having a breakdown right there in front of me." The incident led to Marcus losing his job at that particular casino, but he quickly found employment elsewhere. The assault charges, however, resulted in his DNA being entered into the national database, the crucial step that would eventually lead to his downfall. Elena Vasquez, the night shift janitor whose testimony broke the case, had carried her own burden for 20 years. She had witnessed the relationship between Rebecca and Marcus, had seen the arguments and the tension, and had felt a growing sense of unease in the days before Rebecca's disappearance. "I should have said something sooner," Elena told Detective Martinez. "But who was going to believe me? I was just the cleaning lady, and he was the dealer everyone liked. I was an immigrant woman with broken English, and he was the smart, quiet guy who never caused trouble." Elena's reluctance to come forward was complicated by her own immigration status. In 2004, she had been in the country illegally, working under a false social security number. Coming forward with information about a murder would have meant exposing herself to deportation and separation from her young children. But as the years passed and Elena's immigration status was resolved through amnesty programs, her guilt about Rebecca Williams grew stronger. She began having nightmares about the young waitress, dreams where Rebecca appeared asking why no one had spoken up for her. "I retired last year," Elena explained. "My children are grown citizens now, with good jobs and families of their own. I realized that if something happened to me, this secret would die with me. Rebecca deserved better than that. Her family deserved to know the truth." Elena's decision to finally come forward was triggered by a conversation with her granddaughter, who was studying criminal justice in college. When her granddaughter mentioned working on a project about cold cases, Elena realized that she couldn't take her secret to the grave. The trial of Marcus Chen for the murder of Rebecca Williams began on September 15, 2024, almost exactly 20 years after the crime was committed. The case attracted significant media attention, both because of the long delay in solving it and because of the dramatic nature of Marcus's secret life. The prosecution, led by Deputy District Attorney James Peterson, built their case primarily on deoxyribonucleic acid evidence and Elena Vasquez's eyewitness testimony. The DNA evidence was compelling. The odds of the skin cells under Rebecca's fingernails belonging to someone other than Marcus were calculated at more than 50 million to 1. Elena's testimony proved equally powerful. Despite her age and the passage of time, her memory of events was remarkably clear and consistent. She described in detail the secret meetings she had witnessed between Rebecca and Marcus, the arguments, and Marcus's cold demeanor in the days following Rebecca's disappearance. The defense, led by public defender Maria Santos, attempted to discredit both pieces of evidence. They argued that the DNA evidence was contaminated after 20 years of storage, and that Elena's testimony was unreliable due to the passage of time and her admitted guilt about not coming forward sooner. But the most compelling evidence came from Marcus himself. During cross-examination, his attorney tried to portray him as a victim of circumstances, an undocumented immigrant who had been too frightened to come forward 20 years ago. However, Marcus's own testimony revealed the cold calculation that had characterized his actions both before and after the murder. When asked why he had never expressed remorse for Rebecca's death during their relationship, Marcus replied, "Why would I feel guilty about something that was her choice? She chose to get involved with someone she didn't really know. She chose to threaten my security. Actions have consequences." The jury deliberated for less than 6 hours before returning a verdict of guilty on first-degree murder charges. On December 3, 2024, Marcus Chen was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for the murder of Rebecca Williams. Judge Patricia Hammond, in delivering the sentence, spoke directly to the 20-year delay in bringing the case to justice. "While we cannot restore the years of uncertainty and grief that Rebecca Williams's family has endured," Judge Hammond said, "we can ensure that justice, though delayed, is finally served." The defendant showed a callous disregard for human life and spent 20 years living freely while his victim lay in an unmarked grave. This sentence reflects the severity of his crimes and the court's commitment to ensuring that justice prevails, regardless of how much time has passed. Rebecca's family, who had traveled from Ohio to attend the sentencing, expressed a mixture of relief and ongoing grief. Her sister, Jennifer Williams Thompson, spoke on behalf of the family. 20 years is a long time to wonder, to hope, to fear that we would never know what happened to Rebecca, she said. We're grateful that the truth has finally come to light, but it doesn't bring her back. It doesn't restore the life she should have had, the dream she should have been able to pursue. Marcus Chen stole all of that from her, from us, and from everyone who loved her. The case also highlighted issues within the immigration system and the challenges faced by undocumented witnesses in coming forward with crucial information. Elena Vasquez's 20-year silence demonstrated how fear of deportation can impede criminal investigations and delay justice. As Marcus Chen began serving his life sentence, the full scope of his deception became clear. Immigration officials launched their own investigation into his false identity, uncovering a network of document fraud that had allowed him to live undetected for more than 2 decades. The real Li Wei had died in a car accident in Los Angeles in 2003, around the same time that Marcus had assumed his new identity. This discovery raised questions about whether Marcus had been involved in that death as well, though no charges were ever filed due to lack of evidence. More troubling was the discovery that Marcus may not have been his only victim. Cold case detectives began reviewing unsolved murders and disappearances from Marcus's 20-year tenure in Las Vegas, looking for other cases that might be connected to him. While no definitive links were established, several cases showed similarities to Rebecca Williams's murder. Young women who had disappeared after meeting mysterious men, bodies found in remote desert locations, evidence of strangulation. Detective Martinez, now nearing retirement herself, reflected on the case and its implications. The scary thing about Marcus Chen is how normal he appeared to be, she said. For 20 years, he lived and worked alongside hundreds of people who never suspected what he was capable of. He was the quiet dealer who showed up on time, did his job, and went home. But underneath that facade was someone who could kill without remorse and live with that secret for decades. The case also prompted changes in how Las Vegas Metro Police handle cold cases and evidence preservation. The department implemented new protocols for DNA evidence storage and established a dedicated cold case unit with advanced analytical capabilities. The neon lights of Las Vegas continue to burn brightly, casting their eternal glow over a city that never truly sleeps. The tourists still come, the gamblers still play, and the dreams still beckon from across the desert. But for those who knew Rebecca Williams, the city will never be quite the same. Rebecca was finally laid to rest in a proper ceremony attended by family, friends, and co-workers who had never forgotten her infectious laugh and generous spirit. Her grave marker, paid for by donations from Golden Nugget employees past and present, reads, simply, Rebecca Williams, 1976 to 2004, dreams never die. Elena Vasquez returned to her quiet retirement, finally free of the secret that had haunted her for 2 decades. She established a scholarship fund at UNLV for students studying criminal justice, particularly those from immigrant families who might face barriers in pursuing careers in law enforcement. Marcus Chen remains in prison, where he has become a model inmate. He works in the prison library, teaching English to other inmates and maintaining the same quiet, competent demeanor that had served him so well on the outside. He has never expressed remorse for his crime and has refused all requests for interviews from journalists and true crime enthusiasts. The case serves as a reminder that in a city built on reinvention and second chances, not everyone deserves redemption. Some secrets are too dark, some crimes too heinous, some deceptions too calculated to be forgiven. Justice may be delayed, but it need not be denied forever. The desert keeps many secrets, but occasionally it gives one up. Rebecca Williams waited 20 years for justice, buried beneath the sand and stars. Her story reminds us that truth has its own timeline, and that sometimes, the most patient investigations yield the most satisfying conclusions. In the end, the bright lights of Las Vegas couldn't hide the darkness in one man's heart, and the silence of the desert couldn't muffle the voice of a young woman whose life was stolen too soon. Marcus Chen's carefully constructed house of cards finally collapsed, not because of sophisticated police work or dramatic revelations, but because of the simple testimony of a janitor who decided that truth was more important than safety, and that justice was worth the wait. As Detective Martinez closed the Rebecca Williams file for the final time, she reflected on the strange path that had led to this resolution. 20 years, hundreds of interviews, thousands of man-hours, and millions of dollars in investigation, costs, all ultimately resolved by the decision of one frightened woman to finally tell the truth. Sometimes, she said, justice isn't about brilliant detective work or advanced technology. Sometimes it's just about someone finding the courage to speak up for those who can no longer speak for themselves. The case is closed. The secret is revealed. Marcus Chen will spend the rest of his life in prison, and Rebecca Williams can finally rest in peace. In a city where fortunes are won and lost on the turn of a card, justice dealt the final hand. If this case unsettled you, if it raised more questions than it answered, tell us what you think in the comments. For more deep dives into stories that echoes long after the verdict, hit the subscribe and like the video. Thank you for watching. If this case intrigued you, hit the subscribe button for more true crime fictional stories.